Matthias Schoenaerts stars in The Regime on HBO. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Matthias, I had to start by asking you, Corporal Zubak is such a rich and fascinating character. He's such a figure of, on one hand, like brute force and internal, but he's also very politically shrewd and emotional and sensitive. What most appealed to you about this character when you heard about it and started diving into those scripts?
Well, I think he's somebody trying to move from dark to light. So he came, or at least at the start of the show, we see him coming out of a very dark place, literally and also emotionally, and all of a sudden, he gets the opportunity to really profoundly change his life around, and by growing into that, he also hopes that he can, inspire the person that he's assisting into developing new ethics and new morals in order to have the population benefit from the wealth and the governance that the country is is led by. And the interesting aspect is that we never quite know if his intentions are good or manipulative, or what his intentions are, and that is something that is very appealing to work with, because it allows you to keep people guessing, and so he's not one dimensional, and so yeah, that was something that I was really triggered by.
We were talking about this before we started, but this series has got to be one of the most unique in terms of tone that I've seen anyway in a very long time. It goes from satire, sometimes it's farce, and then it dives into, drama about authoritarianism and state violence. I mean, it's incredibly rich and multifaceted. When you're looking at those scripts and playing these different episodes, how much are you kind of recalibrating your performance to the tone, or are you just playing Zubak very kind of straight and letting, some of the other kind of ambiance set the tone?
Yeah, I think tone and style is in the in the directing, and I think as actors, I mean, I can only speak for myself, of course. I think you just want to bring as much truthfulness to a character as possible, and then let the context and the way it is directed, let that add on to, but let the tone and the style and the choices of the directors not necessarily affect the soul and the core of your character and its journey. I mean, and then again, there's nothing is absolutely true ever. Everything is possible. So it may be in another project, in another satire, you do adapt to it because it wants to be something else. But in this very specific case, I thought it was important to play him as if I was playing, as if I was playing Taxi Driver or something, like really. And then by accident, he becomes comical because he's like this bull in a china shop. And then that contrast becomes hilarious. But I don't think it would be as hilarious if I tried to make it hilarious.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I have to ask you too, working with Kate Winslet, because obviously Zubak and Elena are the heart of this series.
Yeah.
And their dynamic changes so much over these 6 episodes. How much time did you have with her before production? Did you have a rehearsal period? How did you kind of establish that rapport? Because the two.
Well, we spoke a few times on the phone through FaceTime, and because we both were figuring out what this project really was, because nobody really defined it in terms of this is what we're going to make. And on the page, it was just bouncing all directions, because I mean, you're reading it and then one minute you're laughing almost to a point that you're crying, so funny, and then 2 minutes later you're horrified and you're troubled. And so we were trying to figure it out, like, okay, how do we take this, how do we attack this? And so we spoke a lot about it, and then at some point we kind of got a sense. And of course, as you work, it keeps growing. It's never locked in before you start. At least that's the way I like to work. I like to keep it alive and let the elements that happen on the day also affect your choices in the moment. And then it was just about showing up on set and having a blast and having fun and explore and surprise each other, throw things at each other. And just and it's like a tango. It's really it's a tango.
Yeah, the series starts with Elena summoning Zubak to the palace after this incident at Site 5. So, I don't know if he makes a decision to come to the palace or not. He's been summoned, but I wanted to ask you, as you were saying earlier, at what point do you think Zubak starts developing those political ambitions? Because we really see him very quickly in those first few episodes become very shrewd and start to influence Elena. So at what moment do you think he sees an opportunity and starts to seize on it?
Well, I think early on he sees that Elena is kind of in a unstable phase, and that she's not really connecting to the team and the visions and the game plan that they come up with. And then he starts to see how it works, and he starts to understand the dynamics and the ins and outs. And just by nature, I think he starts to communicate about what he sees and what he thinks, and then sees that she kind of absorbs it and is kind of touched by it and triggered by it. And I think it just kind of develops from there. I don't think it's intentional. At some point, it becomes intentional, but I think it started in a natural way. And all of a sudden, he feels there's a hook, and then he starts developing and developing and developing, and tries to get her to do what he believes is right for the people. But then, of course, he gets stuck in a back and forth. It's like a constant power battle. It's also a mother-son relationship. It's also kind of abusive woman-man relationship. It's also mentorship, and and they both have those effects on each other permanently. So it shifts back and forth all the time, to the extent that then, of course, Zubak loses his temper, so to speak, when he realizes that that she's kind of backstabbing him.
Let's talk about that episode where he does kind of go on a page. It's the end of, I think that's the end of episode 3, is so shocking and brutal, and I can't, it's hard to express. Watching you perform that is just so powerful. How do you prepare to do scenes like that? I mean, that is it. I imagine it takes so much of you to get to that emotional state. So what was it like to see that on the page and then try to inhabit Zubak at that moment of where he really kind of breaks?
Yeah, it's always hard to figure out how you get yourself to that point. Of course, I mean, the biggest part is the imagination. So you just imagine what that would be like, and then you place yourself in that situation from within the psychological matrix of the character, and you try to understand what it is that triggers him and activates that very specific element of his persona and his psyche. And then it's just attack. It's like a sprinter. It's just like you hear the shot, you just run. You don't think too much about it. You just attack. You just go for it, and you hope you don't hurt anybody in the process. But then again, I mean, it's a very how do you say that? It's a very controlled way of being totally how do you call that? Ontoerekeningsvatbaar. Being completely irresponsible in a very controlled way.
Yeah, it is so magnetic and kind of shocking to watch. Let's talk about the other kind of side of that coin, which is Zubak's relationship with Agnes, played by Andrea Riseborough. I think those scenes are some of my favorites because there's such an emotional honesty between them. I think that we don't necessarily see with Zubak and other characters until maybe later. What was it like establishing that relationship with Andrea? Because like I said, I think those are some of the most unique scenes in terms of what you get to do and connect with her as a character?
Yeah, I think she's kind of the moral compass to some extent. At least that's how I thought of that character when I first read the scripts. She's kind of the moral compass, and she's the most, I think, in tune with her with her being, and she's not entirely corrupted um, by the madness that surrounds her, and therefore she's somebody that sees things for what they are, doesn't judge them, um, but still respects the function that she has in that very reality. But then when she sees this, this self-destructive organism um, named Zubak, yeah, then it kind of reminds her. I think. I mean, of course, this is imagination. It reminds her of who she used to be, I think, and so there's a very gentle, tender way that they deal with each other without it becoming melodramatic or too corny. I think that speaks for the talent of Andrea, who brings such a delicate, elegant intelligence to how she presents that notion and that understanding of what that person is doing to himself. And yeah, she's a fantastic actress. Wow.
Let's talk about another fantastic performer. You get to share an episode with Hugh Grant as Keplinger,
Yes.
which is so, I mean, talk about another really complicated and kind of psychological dynamic between Zubak and Keplinger in that, prison underneath the palace.
Mm.
It changes so much. You only have the 1 hour with him, but there's such a journey in how you kind of see him, see how he's just as politically manipulative as Elena. What was it like exploring that with him? How much time did you have with him? I mean, I imagine a lot of this had to come together very quickly, but it's such a rich relationship in that short period of time.
No, I remember there's a funny thing. We did a table read, I think, about a month before we started production, and you came by in the afternoon because that's when we were about to do episode 4. And he happened to sit right next to me. It was a huge table, like about 30 some actors and also all the department heads and directors. And he happened to sit next to me. So we did the table read. And in the very first scene, already he grabbed my hand, and there was such I mean, it's like he naturally understood where to take it. And but it was funny because I was just sitting next to him, and all of a sudden he grabs my hand, and he was really already shaping and going there. And then I hadn't seen him until production, and I think he came in like week 12 or something. And then we just we attacked. We just went for it right away. And from the very first rehearsal, he was like so present and so clear, and we enjoyed it. I mean, we were also really listening to each other, and of course we did some improv left and right, and I had a blast working with him. Yeah, very very generous, very sharp, and a good sense of humor. I like it. A very odd sense of humor, very dry. I love it.
Yeah, it comes across in the episode. It's such a fun dynamic to watch unfold. I think one of my favorite aspects of this entire series is the sequence of the palace breach in episode 5. I thought that was, from all departments, just so impeccably crafted. The performances are great. Take us behind the scenes of that process. How long did shooting that sequence take? And I mean, you're navigating around this enormous palace set. There's a lot unfolding. What was it like, shooting that long and really impressive?
I mean, there's a lot, because it involves a lot of people, a lot of extras, a lot of actors, a lot of darkness, a lot of sound, big spaces. So I don't remember exactly how long it took us to shoot, but approximately, I think, 2 weeks at least. Long days, and a lot of patience, because there's a lot of connective tissue scenes, action scenes, So it took a lot of time and patience and commitment. But yeah, the directors did a great. I mean, the entire team did a great job. Not to forget, the art directors, the set designers. I mean, everyone is impressive.
The final episode is also so moving. Those last few scenes that you have with Elena, where you both know exactly what's going to happen and unfold, but can't quite articulate it or don't want to admit what's going to happen. What is it like to perform those scenes with Kate? And you both have such restraint in those moments. These characters have been, at times, as you're saying, Zubak is trying to do the right thing. They also do some terrible things to one another and to others. But it's such a touching, kind of end.
I mean, that scene, especially the scene by the pool.
Yeah.
That's a scene that Kate and I, and also Will, that we spoke about, I think, from the very start of production, because we knew that was a scene. It's so vital, and it really needs to hit the right mark, and it needs to be believable, and we need to believe that Zubak goes with it, that he understands it, but at the same time, we don't want to stuff it with too much expositional dialogue or back and forth about stuff that we've already seen or understood. So how do we make it? How do we make that a love scene? And also, one of the most painful scenes. I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen it. Without over explaining it. So that was a challenge. And I'm so glad that because basically that scene, most of the time we had so many versions coming in, and all the time we were, stripping stuff down. But at the same time, we're like, yeah, but do we understand? Do we believe that? And I think it's by talking about it and working on it for so long that eventually we found a space within ourselves to evoke it without explaining it. And I'm so glad we made that land, because I thought it was vital to really end on true emotion between two people of flesh and blood. So I was like, okay, those scenes need to be stripped of anything that's funny. This needs to hurt, and this needs to hit the soul, and hopefully as deep as possible.
Yeah, it really does. I do want to give a spoiler alert here, because I have to ask you about the end of the very last scene of the series. So if you haven't finished The Regime, pause the interview now, go watch the episodes, and then come back, because I'm so fascinated by that last scene where Elena has kind of put Zubak in that memorial chamber like father. What do you make of that? Because it's on one hand a tribute, but also her relationship with her father was so toxic. To see him inhabiting a similar space is complicated. So what do you make of that final scene?
Well, I think, and that again speaks for the quality of the writing. I think that's open for interpretation. I mean, it could be so many things. Is it a tribute? Is it a way to honor him, or is it a way to honor him and at the same time deculpabilize herself and for what she has done, or is it both, or is it even more things? I think it's all of them, because to some extent, I truly believe that there was love, but it was impossible, and it got infected by outer factors, and it so I think it's all those things, and I like that about it. I don't think Elena had truly had evil intentions, or she might have done evil things, but it was always under the influence of moving parts that she cannot control. And same here. Here she, she had to make this sacrifice, and I think it must have been very hard for her. And I think we also see that, and I think that that's really important, that we believe that it's not just another chapter in the manipulative, sociopathic journey that she's on, and destructive journey that she's on, but that we see that behind all these concrete walls there is a beating heart that is capable of love.
Yeah, I think that really comes through. Matthias Schoenaerts, congratulations on the regime. Thank you so
Thank
much
you so much.
for Derby today.
Okay, have a lovely day.